Alright, hello everyone and welcome back to this video. Welcome back to the channel. So in this video, we are going to talk about the guest paper for AS. So this is on AS paper predictions. I don't do a guest paper as such. I just talk about what topics or what type of questions are more likely to come in. And again, this is just my gut feeling. This is what I gathered from the past exam sessions, from the examiner reports, and some of my gut feeling. Let's get right into it. So question number one, I predicted that would probably be, and this is written in the order of probability, in my opinion, this is what I feel, is that question number one, the highest chances are of having a question on uncertainty, absolute and percentage uncertainties, combination of those depending on the formula, and some scalar vector calculations. The second type of question, second most likely, is base derived, and then some questions where you just have to plug in values or you have to do some analysis. For example, some of you might remember this very recent question that was on a solar panel with intensity, power, and area, where you had to analyze that. And in the past, you've also have other questions. For example, you just have to use equilibrium of forces, you have to plug in values, find out some values, and use that. And the third type of question is going to be projectile motion, because it also hasn't been asked in some time, and I feel like the examiner could potentially ask that. Question number two is usually on kinematics or forces. So my guess is some combination of terminal velocity, could be a graph, could be just verbal reasoning, and forces. So basically the analysis of forces with respect to what's happening to resultant force, what's going to happen to acceleration and whatnot. And the other type of question is one which has equations of motion. So you also have to use the equations of motion, which is kind of part of kinematics, and then some analysis related to work energy power. We've had questions like this. For example, two that come to mind were both regarding a trolley that was moving from uphill to downhill, and we had to do some calculations given the acceleration, distances, velocities, times, and both of these questions also had a graph at the end. And that, if I remember correctly, one was definitely of work energy power, the other one I don't remember. But that type of question can come in. Question number three, I feel like it's going to be turning effects, and +1 means that it's going to be linked with some other chapter. So could be that turning effects is linked with maybe, for example, elastic deformation. So maybe a spring is being compressed, or maybe it's linked to something falling. So it could be potentially linked to work energy power. The second possible type of question is related to deformation. Graph questions could either be of force extension, force length, extension force, length force graphs, or your stress strain graphs, labeling points such as limit of proportionality, elastic limit, calculation of areas, including the counting squares where you have to estimate, for example, the work done, or so that would be the area under a force extension graph. And you have some calculations and some analysis parts as well. So for example, with respect to the ratio questions that we've been doing, so maybe if as compared to one wire that the entire question was about, in the last part you maybe have a wire that has double the diameter, half the length, so how would its spring constant or its Young modulus compare, right? So questions like that. With waves, I doubt that polarization could be tested, and polarization, apart from that, intensity amplitude relationships, which are always tested in waves questions, almost always tested. Whenever you have a question on pure waves and not on superposition, this is definitely tested. And if you've seen past paper questions, you've also seen questions where both of these were combined. So for example, with polarization, Malice's law basically says that the intensity emitted is given by this I naught cos square theta. So maybe instead of intensities or the ratio of intensities, if they ask you for amplitude, so you'll then use this idea that intensity is proportional to the square of the amplitude. Doppler effect, I think this was asked in a very recent exam paper. I think it was as recent as March 25, but I feel like a lot of students have started to take this for granted, so that it's only going to be assessed in P1. So that's why I feel like this is going to come in, and some basic calculations or graphing, or maybe have to extract something from the CRO will come in. Also keep in mind that I've not written the very obvious stuff here. For example, you could be asked maybe something like the definition of acceleration, or maybe like the conditions of equation of motion, or maybe the conditions for equilibrium, or the principle of moments, right? So these things are like the theory stuff. So statements or laws or definitions, these are something that you should have in mind. Question number 5, Young's double slit, I think, is a very high probability of coming in. Then stationary waves, and the third one is diffraction grating. If you do get diffraction grating, then you would be in luck, because diffraction grating is literally the easiest one out of all of these three, in my opinion. Young's double slit is, in my opinion, the most difficult one. Also the one that has not been tested for quite some time. So I feel like that has a chance of coming in. And stationary waves as well, in terms of the formation, in terms of how it varies with time period. So you should know that, for example, if the wave form is like this, so after a quarter of a time period, it becomes like this. Then after another quarter of a time period, it becomes like this. You should also know, for example, the differences between progressive and stationary waves. For example, if this is a progressive wave, I was just talking to a student, so I got to know that people also get confused with this. So on a stationary wave, for example, all points on a loop are in phase, but for example, this point and this point, which are on adjacent loops, they're in anti-phase, their phase difference is 180 degrees. So you just need to be careful and read the question properly. Apart from this, question number 6, that's current, that's electricity. Most of the times you do, sometimes when the questions are different, you have a question on waves and a question on superposition, but usually the questions on electricity are usually, as far as I remember, they are one. So from current, electricity, you can have I equals to A and VQ, the idea of a filament lamp, how and why its resistance changes, and calculations or theory related to resistivity can be asked. So maybe a ratio question like that could also be asked towards the end. So for example, if you have something which has the same volume of wire, but it's stretched, so the length doubles but the area halves, so then you need to say that if the volume is constant and if the length doubles, then the area would halve. And for example, by this analysis, resistance equals rho L over A. So length doubles, so resistance doubles, and because of area halving, resistance doubles again, so the resistance would become 4 times its value, right? So something like this I feel can be asked. Potential dividers, so like with resistors that depend on ambient conditions such as LDRs or thermistors, that can be asked. Resistor combinations and how you have basic series parallel circuits, how you solve those. Internal resistance also, it was asked, I think, throughout the winter 24 series and also through the summer 24, but again I think that that has a higher probability than anything else of coming in. So potentiometers, I think it's not going to be assessed probably, and it's going to be assessed in the MCQs. With question number 7, so you will have definitely this being assessed. This is for certain. So kinetic energy of alpha beta and why they are different. For example, for alpha particles, the kinetic energy is discrete, whereas for beta, it's varying. It has a distribution. And the reason is that when a nucleus decays, the energy of decay is constant. With the alpha, there's just the daughter nucleus, so the new nucleus which forms, and the alpha particle. So they both take like a fixed amount of energy. But with beta, the energy is also then taken by the neutrino in the case of beta positive and the antineutrino in the case of beta negative. And because that takes a varying share of energy each time, it leaves a varying share of energy irrespective of whether it's beta positive or negative. That's important. Quark composition, so we have to figure out, for example, if you've given the overall charge on a hadron, that's what a particle which is made of quarks is called. And if you have to figure out the charge, or you have to predict the flavor of any one of these, so calculations like that, which are pretty straightforward, you just need to know that up charm top are positive 2 by 3e, and the remaining ones down strange bottom are negative 1 by 3e, and their antiquarks have opposite but equal charges. So that's something you can do. And then the categorization based on their names. So for example, electrons, or positrons or neutrinos or antineutrinos all fall under the heading of leptons. Mesons and baryons both come under the heading of hadrons. Baryons are made of 3 quarks, mesons are made of 1 quark and an anti-quark. Right, so you need to know these names. And the last or the least probability one is alpha scattering. Now if I zoom out, I've done like 7 questions here. It could obviously change. Maybe if each question is worth more marks, maybe you'll just have 6 questions. But this is what I feel like it's going to be asked. Maybe you won't have 2 different questions on waves in this. Maybe you'll have like more questions here. Maybe you'll also have momentum pop up. But this is my prediction. This is what I feel like it's going to be asked. Do not take this too seriously. Take this with a pinch of salt. I am not endorsing in any way skipping any section of the syllabus which is not written here. You must know everything, but this is just what I feel like is going to be tested more. And this is just a prediction. So best of luck for tomorrow. Don't stress out. And to be very honest, it might be a very comforting advice to some, very bitter advice to the others, that if you've not been able to do or if you've not been able to study the entire year, then you definitely cannot do this in one night. Take this from experience. So just go to sleep. You'll need a fresh mind tomorrow and go for the exam on a full stomach, full of a healthy, nutritious breakfast. Right? So that's it from my side. I wish all of you the best of luck and may you get better grades than you deserve. And see you in the next video.